Late at night, my aunt suddenly called me on my phone and said that she was experiencing severe pain in her back and needed me to massage it. I went to her room and started massaging her very gently, which brought her some relief. As I continued, we began talking about various things. She asked me what hobbies I had, so I started telling her about my love for outdoor activities, such as playing badminton, swimming, and horse riding, my absolute favorites. I then asked her about her likes and dislikes, and she began sharing them with me. Suddenly, she sat up and said that she too liked horse riding. I told her that was wonderful, but then she looked at me in a strange way and said, "But I prefer riding a black one." The way she looked at me sent a chill down my spine. An eerie silence settled between us, and for a moment, we just stared at each other. My aunt was a young and very beautiful woman, and her words created a storm inside me. And then, what I feared the most happened. I lost control. And then, my name is Ashish. I'm a 17-year-old handsome young man, the only son of my parents. When I completed my school education, my father started searching for a good college for me. In the meantime, my uncle, who lived in another city, called my father. After catching up and asking about our well-being, he shared news that left us stunned. He had remarried. 4 years ago, my uncle had married for the first time, but just a few months after the wedding, serious arguments started between him and his wife. Despite the family's efforts to reconcile them, my aunt didn't want to stay with him and eventually left after getting a divorce. To this day, I don't know the exact reason for their separation, as I was quite young at the time, and my aunt had made many accusations against my uncle. No one could fully understand who was at fault since they lived alone in another city. When my uncle declared that he didn't want to stay with her, the family had no choice but to accept his decision, and they separated. My uncle worked in Saudi Arabia but would visit home occasionally. During the conversation, when he learned that my father was looking for a good college for me, he suggested, "There are excellent colleges here, so send Ashish to stay with me." Anyway, I was planning to call him here, as I've recently remarried and can't leave my wife, Mala, alone. If Ashish comes here for college, it will be great because Mala won't be alone, and I can return to Saudi Arabia without worry. My father agreed, and it was decided that I would stay with my uncle and study. The following week, I reached my uncle's house. He was overjoyed to see me and said, "Now that you're here, I don't have to worry about anything. Let me introduce you to your aunt. She will be very happy to see you because ever since I told her about you, she's been eagerly waiting. Before, she was worried about being alone, but when I told her you're a cheerful and friendly person, she was relieved, as she's just like you, full of laughter and talkative." As soon as I reached my uncle's house and my new aunt opened the door, I was stunned. She looked half my uncle's age, appearing no older than 18. Her beauty was so striking that she seemed no less than a fairy, with a build and radiance that even actresses couldn't match. Her long, thick black hair was open and swaying in the breeze. I was so mesmerized that I forgot to blink. I still couldn't believe that this was my new aunt. I was lost in my thoughts when my uncle snapped me out of it and said, "What happened, Ashish?" "This is your aunt. Won't you say hello?" I quickly greeted her and stepped inside. My aunt went to prepare tea and snacks for me, but I kept stealing glances at her because I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that my nearly 35-year-old uncle had married someone who looked 18. I thought to myself that maybe my aunt was actually the same age as my uncle, but had taken such great care of herself that she looked so young. Whatever the case, my uncle was very fortunate to have such a beautiful second wife. After having tea and snacks, my uncle began packing his bags. He told me that he would be leaving for Saudi Arabia on a morning flight the next day. Handing me a list, he said, "These are the names of the best colleges in this city. You can choose any one of them and get admitted." Hearing this, I was thrilled. Then my uncle said, "Look, Ashish, I'm leaving your aunt here solely under your care. And there's something else. A few days ago, your aunt had an accident where she fell from the stairs, which caused some strain in her muscles. When I consulted the doctor, He said that she would experience recurring pain for the next few months, which might be quite uncomfortable for her. So, you'll need to take care of her. Whenever necessary, take her to the doctor. Also, do any work she asks you to do, because you're her only support here. I reassured him, "Don't worry, I'll take good care of her and make sure she doesn't face any issues." The next morning, my uncle left for Saudi Arabia, leaving me and my aunt alone in the house. Since we were still new to each other, our conversations were minimal. That day, I went to the college to finalize my admission and was successfully enrolled. Gradually, days passed, and I started attending college, where I made some good friends. Meanwhile, my aunt and I began to talk more freely and became more comfortable around each other. One night, I was sitting in my room studying when my aunt called me. I immediately ran to the kitchen and was stunned to see her. She was wearing a beautiful nightgown, the type women usually wear at bedtime. However, it was sheer and highlighted her beauty. I quickly diverted my gaze. She asked, "Ashish, would you like some tea or coffee?" I replied, "I'll have coffee," and was about to head back to my room when she stopped me. "Where are you going?" she said. "I'll make it in just 2 minutes. After that, we can go to the terrace and enjoy the coffee. The cool breeze outside makes it a wonderful experience." Her suggestion made me uneasy because I was well aware of the kind of emotions I was feeling at that moment, and they didn't seem right. So I made an excuse saying, "You go to the terrace by yourself. I need to study right now." Without waiting for her response, I returned to my room. A little while later, she brought a mug of coffee to my room. As she handed it to me, a bit of coffee spilled on me. Startled, she immediately started wiping it off. But as she did so, a shiver ran through my entire body. I quickly stepped back and told her, "Don't worry, I'm fine. You should go and rest." Then I went straight to the bathroom. Standing there, I tried to calm myself down. I reminded myself that she was my aunt, and despite her young age, she was like a mother to me. I resolved not to let any inappropriate thoughts enter my mind. One day, my aunt and I went shopping. While we were there, I bought some clothes for myself, and so did she. That's when I found out that my aunt was indeed 18 years old. In the course of our conversation, I casually asked her how she met my uncle. She explained, "Your uncle saved my life. One day, I had an accident, and it was your uncle who took me to the hospital. From there, our meetings gradually increased. I'm an orphan and have no one. Since childhood, I lived with my uncle and aunt, but they treated me very badly. When I found support in your uncle, and we decided to get married, I didn't delay and tied the knot with him. Now, I'm living a happy life." I told her, "That was a great decision because my uncle is a wonderful person." She smiled and replied, "Yes, that's true. He takes great care of me. Even when he was leaving for Saudi Arabia, he was so worried about me that he left you here to look after me." Everything seemed fine, but I couldn't help noticing something odd. Ever since my uncle left for Saudi Arabia, my aunt's choice of clothing at home didn't seem appropriate. The clothes she wore were too revealing. Then, I reasoned that maybe she didn't pay much attention to such things, or perhaps saw me as her son, which made her comfortable wearing such outfits around me. I decided to ignore it and focused on my studies. Meanwhile, practicals began in my college, and I was assigned a project with one of my friends. My friend suggested that he come to my house to work on the project since his family was large, and there was constant noise at his home. My house, on the other hand, was quiet, with only my aunt and no children to disturb us. Because of this, my friend Aman started coming over to my house daily after college to work on the project. Gradually, he also became friends with my aunt. She even began helping us with our project. I found her nature to be very warm and caring. Every time a man came over, my aunt would prepare delicious snacks for him, and he would always compliment her, saying, "Your aunt treats me so well and never differentiates between you and me. In fact, it feels like she's not your aunt, but one of our college friends." One day, during our conversation, Aman asked her, "How far did you study?" This question brought a sudden sadness to her face. Seeing her expression change, we asked her what was wrong. She explained, "My uncle and aunt barely let me complete the 12th grade. After that, they flatly refused to spend money on my education. That's why, despite wanting to, I couldn't continue my studies." I told my aunt, "But now, you don't have any such restrictions, and you're still young. If you want, you can restart your studies. I don't think Uncle would object to this. Why don't you join my college?" Hearing this, my friend Aman also got excited and said, "Yes, you should join. Then the three of us can have fun together and study hard too." Smiling, my aunt replied, "I would love to, but since I got injured a few days ago, I often experience sudden pain in my body. That's why I can't go to college regularly for now. Also, I'm married now and I have household responsibilities. In the future, when I have children, how will I manage college along with taking care of them? Attending college daily isn't something I can handle." Hearing this, Aman and I started thinking. I then suggested, "In that case, why don't you try distance learning? There are many colleges where you can enroll and continue your studies from home." Both my aunt and Aman's faces lit up at my suggestion. They said, "Wow, that's a fantastic idea." We immediately started searching for a good college for her, and after some time, we finalized one. However, my aunt said, "Before doing anything, I need to get your uncle's permission. Only after that will I enroll." That evening, my aunt spoke to my uncle, and he happily gave his approval. She was thrilled about resuming her studies. However, she confessed, "Ashish, I've been out of touch with studies for a while now, and I feel nervous about managing everything from home. If I went to college, the professors would teach and explain everything. But at home, how will I understand things on my own?" I reassured her. "Oh, is that all? Don't worry about it. I'll help you with your studies. Whenever you have any doubts or need help, just ask me anytime without hesitation." Hearing this, she became very happy and soon enrolled in a college for distance learning, starting her studies from home. I often helped her with her studies, and Aman also pitched in. The three of us frequently went out together, sometimes for dinner, sometimes to shopping malls. We developed a great friendship. One night, my aunt suddenly called me and asked me to come to her room. When I got there, she told me her back was hurting a lot and that the doctor had prescribed a specific oil for massages. She said that when my uncle was here, he used to give her proper massages, but now that he was away, she couldn't reach the affected area herself and needed my help. I immediately took the oil from her and started massaging her back, but for some reason, while I was massaging her, I noticed that she was giving me strange, sidelong glances. Feeling uncomfortable, I quickly finished the massage and made an excuse that I was feeling very sleepy. I got up immediately and went back to my room. Gradually, I started noticing that my aunt would ask me to do every small task for her. Whether she was going out and needed her necklace clasped at the back or wanted help draping her sari, she would always involve me. While there wasn't anything inherently wrong with these requests, as I was there to help her, the way she would get unusually close to me while I was helping, and the way she looked at me, started to make me uneasy. I began suspecting that perhaps she had something else on her mind. This suspicion made me uncomfortable, and I started distancing myself from her. I kept our conversations minimal. She would often tell me not to call her aunt, and to call her Mala instead, but I refused every time. One night, it was raining heavily, and there was a fierce storm outside. Suddenly, there was a loud knock on my door. When I opened it, my aunt entered my room and said, "I'll sleep here tonight because I'm terrified of this heavy rain. I'm so anxious I can't sleep." Hearing this, I panicked. I started thinking about what might happen if my aunt stayed in my room for the entire night. I told her, "Come on, you're grown up and you're scared of just a little rain. Don't worry, I'm in the next room. If you need anything, just call me." But she ignored everything I said and stormed to my bed, lying down without hesitation. I stood there, frozen, staring at her. Then she looked at me and said, "Why are you standing there? Come and lie down here to sleep." Her words made me feel incredibly uncomfortable. The situation had become so confusing and awkward that I didn't know what to do. I told her, "Now that I'm awake, I think I'll just sit and study for a while." Saying this, I pretended to read while secretly waiting for my aunt to fall into a deep sleep. Once I was sure she was asleep, I quietly got up and lay down on the sofa. The next morning, my aunt complained about me sleeping on the sofa. She asked why I went to such trouble and whether I couldn't sleep properly because of her. She seemed overly concerned, but I told her it was nothing to worry about. After that, I started speaking to her even less, focusing primarily on my studies. This led her to start complaining, saying, "Ashish, you're not the same anymore. You don't talk to me like before, and you don't even take me out anymore." I told her, "My exams are coming up, and I need to focus on studying, so I won't be able to spend much time with you. I'm sorry about that." Saying this, I returned to my room and locked the door from the inside. However, that night, she called me to her room again and asked me to massage her back. As I was doing so, she suddenly sat up and said, "You never told me about your hobbies." I replied, "I like outdoor activities like traveling, playing badminton, swimming, and horseback riding." Since she had asked me, I asked her the same question, "What do you like?" She gave me a strange look and said, "I like horseback riding too." I replied, "Wow, we share the same interest." But then she looked at me in a peculiar way and said, "But I only like riding black horses." The strange smile that appeared on her face sent shivers down my spine. I began sweating profusely. A tense silence filled the room. She kept trying to subtly imply something, and I began to understand exactly what she was suggesting. That's when I lost my composure and yelled, "What are you saying to me?" She looked startled and said, "Ashish, I think you're misunderstanding me." I replied, "I don't think I'm misunderstanding anything." Saying this, I immediately left her room, fuming with anger. I couldn't understand why she was behaving this way and making such inappropriate hints. From that day on, I stopped talking to her even more. Though she tried her best to convince me that I had misunderstood her, I pretended to believe her, but I stayed distant. One day, I suddenly felt unwell at college and decided to come home early. When I entered the house, I was shocked to hear my friend Amon's laughter coming from my aunt's room. Amon had told me earlier that he needed to take his mother to the hospital that day, but what was he doing here alone with my aunt? I already had doubts about my aunt, but I never suspected that my friend Amon would lie to me and come here. I quietly stood outside, listening to their conversation. They were mocking me. My aunt said, "Your friend Ashish is such a coward. I've hinted at him so many times, but I think he doesn't have any manliness in him. That's why he keeps avoiding me all the time. To be honest, I see a real man in you." Hearing this, Aman laughed and replied, "Forget about Ashish, he's just a timid person. Be happy with me instead." What happened next left me utterly shocked. What was supposed to be only my uncle's right was now being given to Aman. I couldn't bear to watch anymore, so I immediately left the house and went to a park to sit. The scene kept replaying in my mind, and I felt an uncontrollable rage building up inside me. I had made up my mind to expose my aunt's true face. She was betraying my uncle, and I could not let that happen. Without delay, I called my uncle and told him every detail of my aunt's behavior. My uncle was furious and immediately booked an emergency flight back to India. He told me he would be home in 3 days. During those 3 days, I remained completely silent, ensuring my aunt didn't get the slightest hint that I had uncovered her truth. When my uncle returned home, he wasted no time. The moment he arrived, he slapped my aunt hard across the face. She was utterly shocked and had no idea what was happening. She asked, "Why have you come back suddenly, and why are you treating me like this?" My uncle yelled, "How dare you do such a thing with Ashish's friend?" Hearing this from my uncle, my aunt was terrified and started crying, pleading for forgiveness. She said, "Please forgive me." What else could I have done? I had no other option. My uncle shouted, "But I told you to do this only with Ashish. Then why did you involve his friend? I had only given you permission to go as far as Ashish." Hearing these words from my uncle, the ground beneath my feet seemed to vanish. I couldn't understand what was happening. My uncle continued, "You always boasted about how beautiful you are, how you could seduce anyone. Yet you failed to win over this simple boy?" My aunt replied, "I tried everything. I did all sorts of things to make him lose control, but he kept distancing himself from me instead of coming closer. I even tried to explain it to him in so many ways, but he refused to understand anything. That's why I thought if I couldn't succeed with him, I might as well use his friend." Hearing their conversation, I lost my temper. I turned to my uncle and shouted, "What are you even talking about?" My uncle glared at me and said, "Listen, Ashish, you will have to do this for me, no matter what. You need to give me a child. If you don't, everyone will know that I am infertile. My first wife left me because I couldn't give her a child, and she ruined my reputation. Everyone started questioning me, calling me impotent. I couldn't tolerate the humiliation, so I married again to clear my name. I wanted to prove to the world that I am capable of fathering a child. That's why I enrolled you in college and left you here with her. I wanted her to trap you and have a child with you because I wanted the heir to come from within the family. You were the best option for me since you're around the same age as her, making it easier. But you, God knows what you're made of, didn't fall for her beauty, something most men would have at first glance. At first, I pleaded with you, but now you've left me with no choice. If you had agreed willingly, I wouldn't have had to resort to this. But my reputation and legacy are at stake, so you will do this, whether you like it or not." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He then instructed my aunt to prepare milk for me and mix it with a drug he had told her about. Saying this, they both left the room. I was tied up on the bed, feeling helpless and betrayed. Tears rolled down my cheeks as I thought about how my own uncle could stoop so low just to satisfy his ego and protect his image in society. I struggled against the ropes binding me, but they were too tight. Suddenly, I noticed Aman entering my room through the window. Seeing him shocked me. He gestured for me to stay silent and untied my hands and feet. Overwhelmed with relief, I hugged him tightly. Up until that moment, I had hated him, but at that moment, he became my savior. We escaped through the window and rode his bike to a park. Once we caught our breath, I looked at him with astonishment and asked, "How did you suddenly show up at my window?" A man replied, "I had come to meet your aunt, but I had no idea your uncle was home. As I approached the door, I overheard your conversation and stayed to listen. When I realized what they were planning, I couldn't stand by and let it happen to you. I know you're a decent person, and seeing this injustice enraged me. That's why I took the opportunity to save you." I hugged him again and thanked him. If he hadn't come at the right time, my life would have been ruined. Using his phone, I immediately called my father and told him everything. My father was equally shocked to learn that his own brother could stoop so low. Later, my father confronted my uncle and severed all ties with him. He told my uncle, "If anyone else had done this to my son, they would be in jail by now. But because you're my brother, I'm sparing you this time." Afterward, I packed my belongings and returned to my hometown. I enrolled in another college and tried to move on. However, the incident left a deep scar on me. Sometimes the greatest betrayal comes from those closest to us. It's hard to believe how selfishness can blind someone to the point where they cross every limit. In today's world, people are often so consumed by their own interests that they stop caring about others' feelings or well-being. That's why it's important to always stay alert and never blindly trust anyone.